Hi, this video is going to go through the structure of an AQA GCSE exam paper. It's going to apply to both paper 1 and paper 2. The intention is with this video that you might watch it sort of the night before you go into the exam, just to remind you of some of the key points for how to approach the exam paper, and I'll share some of my thoughts on that with you. So that's the standard page on the front of the exam that you'll see when you walk in. And then you open up the paper and you start off with section A. Section A is 20 marks. Now, I'm looking at the 2019 paper here. I'm anticipating the structure of the paper is going to remain the same. I'm recording this in 2022, but it should remain relatively similar in years to come. All right, they'll probably, they'll change around when the 6-mark questions come. But essentially, I am expecting, I don't see any reason that they wouldn't start off the section A with 6 multiple choice questions. All right, and again, it's paper 1 and paper 2. So the most important thing about the multiple choice questions, well, there's 2 things. Number 1, make sure you know how to fill in the box. Read this before the exam. You don't want to be reading that in the exam. It's a waste of time. It's the same every year. It tells you how to fill in the boxes, all right, the correct method, wrong methods, and how you change your answer. It's really important that you know that before you go in, so that you don't need to waste your time reading it. But you have to fill the boxes in like that because it's marked by a computer. And if you don't do the correct mark, all right, there's a chance that the computer won't see. If you put like a little tick in the box, the computer might not see it and you might not get a mark. The second mistake with multiple choice questions that students regularly make is that they leave it blank. Now, I'm sure the intention with that is they think, well, I'm not sure of the answer. I'm going to come back at the end and I'll put an answer then. And they leave it blank. And what happens is you then go through the paper. You answer 3 6-mark questions, 2 9-mark questions, a 12-mark question, plus others, calculations, etc. Your mind completely forgets the fact that you left a multiple choice question and it's left blank. Of course, the sensible thing to do, you answer the question, put a star by it, right? Just guess the answer. There's a 25% chance you get it right. You put a big star next to it, and if you remember at the end of the paper, you go back to it and have another look. And if you don't, well, it's not the end of the world. There's a 25% chance you got it right, rather than a 0% chance if you leave it blank. Okay. So after you finish the 6 multiple choice questions, then you are on to some what I would call short answer questions. The command word is either identify, all right, and identify means the same as state or list. And to identify, state or list something, you can do that very briefly. So identify 2 reasons why employees choose to leave a business. They're bored at work, they're not paid enough. All right, 2 reasons. Very, I've just identified them. I've not explained them at all. All right, you could potentially answer an identify question in 2-mark identify question with 2 words. Okay, state 2 methods of financial motivation: bonus, commission. Move on. All right, so just try and save a bit of time on those identify questions whilst making sure you're getting the marks. The explain questions obviously require you to do a little bit more. All right. In this case, it's going to be providing a definition. Explain the term delayering. Delayering occurs when businesses reduce the number of layers of management, often to reduce costs. All right, and that's a clear explanation of the term delayering. Explain what it is and why it might happen. All right, should be enough for 2 marks there. Explain the purpose of a job description. It helps a business identify the most suitable candidate because the skills are identified within the job description. So what you're doing there is you are answering the question. You're ensuring that you get 2 marks. You make a point, you explain it. Okay, this one tells you to explain using an example what a service is. So a definition plus an example. So that they tell you what to do. Then there's a 4-mark question here. All right, but it's like too many 2 marks, isn't it? State and explain 2 types of employment contract. Part-time, explanation, it's less than a full-time contract. Full-time, 35 to 40 hours a week. Okay, so there you go. That's section A. Okay, so the rest of the exam is case study based. So it's really, really, really important that you read the case study carefully. How the examiners make the exam is they decide what topics they're going to assess, then they write the questions, then they write the case studies to help you with the questions. Okay, so there's lots of different ways to write a case study, you know, and your teacher might tell you really good ways of interacting with it, but I would suggest that you read the case study carefully and you make some annotations. All right, maybe you just summarize what you're being told in each paragraph, or you have read the questions in advance and you underline what's relevant for what question, and just put a little annotation there so you can come back and read it. The key thing that you need to be able to understand is how the business makes money, and that might sound stupid, but you need to ensure that you have a very clear understanding of what the business does to make money. All right, and that will help you with the context of the business. Other things to look out for are every time that the case study says something like the business wants to, the owner wants to, they have this objective, I would underline any objective that the case study identifies, because that's going to help you evaluate. Most of the questions will require some sort of application to the case study. This question doesn't. All right, you read the case study and then it tells you to state 2 factors of production. State is identify, remember. Capital, enterprise. There you go, 2 marks. You haven't need to use the case study. This one also doesn't require the case study. Okay, all right, and read the question, you might see why. We've got a calculation question here, 5 marker. These are challenging. Read them carefully. The key thing about this question was it was the profit per bike. They make 600 bikes. Lots of people got 4 marks because they calculated the profit, but this per children's bike bit, students didn't interact with. So I would just, make sure you know what you're supposed to calculate. I would underline that as a student so I know what it is, and then I can come back at the end. Have I actually done that? It tells you need to write the formula there. You get a mark for it. They helpfully remind you with this space. Okay, so now we've got a question that requires the case study. All right, it's a 9-mark question. All right, so the 9-mark question requires you, this case, it's advise fleet bikes whether or not just-in-time stock control, whether or not that's a good idea. So they're giving you one option, just-in-time stock control. You could look at the pros, you could look at the cons, you could have a conclusion. AQA are very specific. They say there is no structure that they want for a 9-mark question. They just want you to answer the question. So however you choose to approach it is up to you, but there are some features of a 9-mark question which it's probably important to know. Now, I recommend that students take a balanced approach. They do a paragraph looking at a pro or the benefits of doing it, a con, really well explained, or the disadvantages of doing it, and then a focused conclusion. So I use this little checklist. You use key terms accurately. You have to use the case study. If you do the best answer in the world about the pros and cons of just-in-time and whether or not a business should do it, but it's not relevant to fleet bikes, then in the case study that you've read, you're going to get 3 marks maximum. Okay, so you have to use the case study. You use chains of analysis. Okay, basically identifying causes and effects. Some people will tell you you've got to have 4, you've got to have 6 chains in an argument. All right, I don't find that helpful personally. Just explain something, right? I think that telling students to count the number of chains that they're writing in an answer is distracting. So just make sure you've got a clear explanation. All right, and with a focused conclusion that is supported using evidence from the case study. So that's my recommendation on the 9-marker. All right. Now I suggest you answer the question in order, because what you're getting you're getting a story about a business effectively, all right, and the story develops. So I definitely think go through the paper in order. Start with section A. That will get you thinking. It's just knowledge, brief explanation. That's kind of gets you in the business frame of mind. And then read the case study as you're going through. Answer the questions in order. It will develop your understanding of the case study. All right, and here we've got our first 6-mark question. Okay, people ask how much to write. You can think that the exam board is going to give you this much space. All right, so if you've got normal handwriting, they expect you to be able to answer within this space. If you've got small handwriting, you might not use all of it. If you've got big handwriting, they will have catered for that. So I would say that's plenty there for a 6-mark question. It's really only a paragraph that you need for a 6-mark question. 6-mark questions are the ones that students get most confused with. Most people are happier with a 9-mark question. The key thing of the 6-mark question is you have to explain in detail one thing. All right. In this case, it's one method they could use to provide good customer service. You've got to reference the case study, but it's just one method clearly explained. You might be asked for one advantage, one disadvantage, one impact. Okay, an impact or an effect can be positive or negative, but it will be just one thing. You make a point. Okay, you can think of a peel paragraph if that helps you. But again, you don't have to think, right, where's my point, where's my evidence, where's my explanation? It's more, right? You explain one thing, you weave in evidence from the case study, and you clearly explain it using connectives, all right, in a paragraph. That's how to answer a 6-mark question, all right? So there's another 9-mark question here, all right, and it's external recruitment, yes or no. So again, they've given you one option. In some 9-markers, they will say, should they do this or this? That tells you your paragraphs. The first paragraph is option 1, second paragraph, option 2. Okay, so that's that. Then you can see we come on to section C, It's a second case study, and again, questions follow. All right, I recommend answering in order because they add to the case study. These little bits in the boxes is in addition to the bit before. So you're building up a picture of the business until we get to the 12-mark question. Now, the 12-mark question in many ways is easier than the 9-mark question because they give you 2 options, all right? They want you to you have to read the question carefully, all right? They want to increase sales in this case. They give you 2 options to do that. You need to analyse the effect on sales and say which one will have the biggest impact on sales. Okay, so this question is very clearly about sales. They've asked various things in the past that are more complicated than this. So read the 12-mark question carefully. So one question, for example, in recent years was a business wants to reduce its costs. Both options will have the same effect on costs, but they want you to tell which of those 2 options had the biggest long-term effect on the business. So that's a slightly different question. So make sure you are reading the question carefully. But 12-mark question. 1 paragraph on the pros of option 1, I suggest. You can do cons too, but you don't have to. 1 paragraph on the pros of option 2. I recommend saving your cons for your conclusion, where you're going to say, I recommend option 1 because of this, whereas option 2 has these very serious drawbacks, which means it shouldn't be done. All right. So in a 12-mark question, what do you need to do? Again, you use evidence, you explain causes and effects, you have a focused, focused conclusion. It values one option over the other and is supported using evidence from the case study. In other words, in the 12-mark question, you say, I'm choosing this option because, but I'm not choosing this option because. All right. So that's the main difference between the 9 and the 12. You mention both options in your conclusion. You say which one you're picking and why, and you say why you're discounting the other. All right. So in summary, I recommend you answer the questions in order. Start with section A to get yourself in a business frame of mind. You think about a minute per mark plus a reading and planning time. So it's a 90 mark exam. You have an hour and 45 minutes, which is an extra 15 minutes. So you've got like 15 minutes reading and planning time. I do recommend writing a little bullet point plan for certainly for the 9 and 12 marks, if not the 6 mark question too, just thinking about what you're going to say. I think that planning time is time well spent and will ensure you get more marks. Make sure you answer all of the questions, especially the multiple choice questions. I suggest reading and annotating the case study carefully. Okay, the case study is where the marks come from. You've got your business knowledge, all right, you have to apply it to the case study to get the marks. Make sure you read the question carefully, all right, and you know what you're answering. I've mentioned planning. Try to stick to the space given in the booklet. In the examiner's report every year, it says extra pages rarely gain extra marks. They give you the space that they think you can answer in, all right. A student this year did their mock exam, used up about a third of the page for the 9 marker. They showed it to me and said, why did I only get 3 marks? And it's like, well, you know, you've only written 1 paragraph there and they've told you how much to write. So, you know, they try and give you a hint for how much to write. All right. And if you have time at the end, which you might not, it is quite tight on time. If you have time, go back through the paper, make sure you've answered all the questions, and you know, just double check your answers. You probably shouldn't have that much time left at the end of the paper. Okay, so anyway, I hope that was helpful, and good luck in your exams.